Hello and welcome to the year of being 70. This is me, Lucy Makara, and my childhood long-term friend Lisette Schoutemaker, and we are both 70. And we decided around our birthdays. Lisette was 70 at the end of September last year. I was 70 at the end of October. We've known each other since we were 8, so we've decided to talk on a weekly basis about our memories, our lives, the things that have changed for us over that time. And here we are at episode 22.
22. I'm 70 and a half already now.
Wow, wow. Yeah,
Yeah,
very grown up, is
yeah.
it?
Okay. So, what I want to know, Lucy, is when you grew up, how was it, in the social arena? Did your parents have friends over that they give like business dinners? How was your social life as a child, and what do you do now?
Oh gosh, it's changed. Yes, well, it's changed so much. So yes, we're talking about our social lives and entertainment and entertaining rather this week. Well, as I've said before, I grew up in quite an old-fashioned, formal kind of household, and my parents' social life, as I saw it, would be they would go out quite often to dinner, and when they went out to dinner they would very much dress up. I mean, my mother had evening dresses, and my father would wear black tie often, sometimes just a suit. But they would also, because they were quite involved with sort of City of London stuff. And sometimes they would go out to dinner in, full kind of long dress for my mother, tailcoat, white tie for my father. But at home, they would give dinner parties periodically. I don't know how often, maybe once a month or something. And sometimes they would get somebody in, a professional cook in, and it would be very sort of formal. And at the end of, I mean, we would be banished as children from anywhere we could be seen. And it would be the sort of dinner where they would be up in the drawing room, as they called it first, and then they would come down to the dining room and have dinner, probably a three-course dinner, I'm guessing. And then the ladies would get up and leave and go upstairs to so-called powder their noses. And then they would sit in the drawing room and talk among themselves for it. The men would be downstairs having port and cheese, and then later the men would go up, and everybody would be together again. And that would be how it. Yeah, that was how it
Yeah,
was.
yeah. And was this, how old were you when it was, or was it all through, your younger years?
I think I remember, I sort of think I remember it happening till I was certainly 12, 13, maybe later. Yeah, it was how they entertained.
How they entertained. It sounds like such another world, right?
I
Yeah.
know it is. So, and how about your parents? Because obviously, I mean, you were in the Netherlands,
I
and
still am.
you
I
still
still
are.
am in the Netherlands. I think, what I remember is in our old house, so where I lived from 2 to 13 or so, I can't really remember my parents entertaining. I mean, they had parties. I think, yeah, I think when my father turned 40, they had a party. And I remember finding them very odd. And only later I understood that they were already half drunk before they went in a bus to go to dinner somewhere. But I did not know that concept before. But we mostly had like my grandparents over for, I don't know, Christmas meals and such. And then when my father was more successful and we lived in a house that my parents had built, then we had dinner parties and they would dress up, but not anything as formal as your parents. And we would actually not banished to not to be seen, but we would go around with small, beautiful boxes with cigarettes and offer people cigarettes.
Oh yes, I mean, smoking. The whole smoking thing was so.
Smoking was a thing, and you offer that alongside the alcohol, which is another kind of poison we're now finding out, right? And there again, I remember them giving a party. We had a large garden, and as as the hole was dug for the house, my parents thought, oh, we might dig another hole. So we had a swimming pool, which was quite rare at the time. And again, I remember, first my mother was stung by a bee on her lip, so she had a big lip, whereas this was like their day. And then yeah, they all got quite drunk, and one of them kind of fell into the swimming pool, and everybody laughed. And of course, I was a bit bigger then, but still, that these adults would kind of drink so much is only something that I've discovered later. But it was more informal. It was really with friends also. But my mother would also give like these business dinners, and she kept a notebook to in which she mentioned, what they had served, who was there, the table seating, and what she was wearing, so she wouldn't wear the same thing twice.
Yes, I think some of the dinners my parents, well, my mother gave were also sort of business dinners in a kind of in a broader context. And yes, the people would be invited for, sort of business type reasons, I suppose.
Yeah.
Or they were clients of my father's, sort of, they were having their genealogical research done and things like that. So yes,
Yeah.
that was part of it too, definitely. But yes, but the smoking thing is interesting, isn't it? Because my parents didn't smoke, and my father actually hated smoking. And but when people came to dinner, the ashtrays would come out, and people would smoke, and there would be a smell of smoke in the house that there never was usually. But that was just the norm, wasn't it? I mean, everybody smoked indoors
Everybody smoked
over
everywhere.
meals. I mean, I think, and the men would have. I mean, not my father, but lots of men would have cigars
Yeah.
with their port and cheese.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah,
a
my parents didn't smoke either, but the cigarette was still, a thing of luxury and maybe also a bit American.
yeah, maybe. And what about you as a child? What was your social life like?
Yeah, I think my social life was at school, and then we played in the street all through summer. We would play in the street with whoever came out of their houses. And there wasn't much traffic, so we could do that, and it was great. And we would have, these teams after dinner, and at some point, our neighbor's house was rented by an actor and his wife, and they came out to play. And then, all the parents came out to play, and to me, that was a wonderful summer.
That's lovely, lovely sense of community. I mean, I grew
Yeah,
up in,
yeah,
in London in a London square, so the houses were all around this sort of green garden, big green sort of garden, if you like. I mean, green, I mean grass, and all the children would play in the square, and we would
yeah,
come out after school, and we would come out at weekends and play. So that was apart from school, which of course was also my social life, and quite a lot of the children went to the same schools. So, we would see them at home and see them.
yeah.
And, but we would go to tea with people after school every so often, or have friends home to tea, because we had this weird tea thing after school. It was our last meal of the day, which was sandwiches and cake, as we've already said. Quite bizarre.
Yeah.
But so people would come to tea, they'd come back with you after school, and then they'd be collected about 6 o'clock or 6:30 and by parents or whoever, and go home. So that was.
Yeah, when I was, 8, 9, 10, I would go to lunch with people because we had school in the morning, then lunch hour, and then school sometimes in the afternoon, with Wednesday afternoons were off. And it was very different how people did. We are a land of sandwiches. We just eat bread and, a little spread. But some people's houses, you had to have your first sandwich was with contentment. So it meant there was basically nothing on it.
Oh, you were just contented with what you got.
You was content or contented with what you got. And yeah, I thought that was weird, and I didn't really like going there again. But it was also somehow a concept that, now 62 years later has still stayed with me.
Yeah, yeah,
And I wonder if it was whether those people were economizing, they didn't have so much money. It was, or whether it was a thing to teach your children to be content. I don't know.
Yeah, interesting, really, when you, as a child, you went into other people's houses and homes, and there's a sort of slight difference in family culture, if you like, and you never quite knew how to what to make of it in a sense. And in retrospect, you can sometimes see that some families perhaps had less money, or
Yeah,
had different
yeah.
beliefs or something, and that was what was happening. But you couldn't tell that as a child.
No, not really. We knew nothing.
No,
We had no internet. We knew absolutely nothing.
no, we just knew what was around us and what was in books, and that was it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, later, we always did birthday parties. I really learned from my parents to celebrate your birthday. Another year, you're still here. Invite friends, do something. They did that all the time. And so that's really something I've also adopted.
Yes, yes, we always used to have birthday parties. And again, when I was quite young, they were again quite sort of formalized. And you would have usually the people in your class and some of the friends of your parents' children, your parents' friends' children
Yeah.
would have to
Yeah.
be invited that you never really knew very well. And then it would always be that the parents would hire a conjurer. It was always a conjurer, a magician, somebody who did tricks, or it might be a Punch and Judy show, but there would be some entertainment.
Punch and Judy, what is that? I don't know what that is.
Oh gosh, it's so English. Yes,
Oh, is this with puppets?
yes, it's a puppet show.
Jan Klaas and Katrien. I can say this for the Dutch people listening. Jan
Right,
Klaas and Katrien.
right.
We have these figures too, these
Yes,
puppets.
so
Yeah. But that's when you were very small, right?
yes. I mean, I guess up to the age of maybe 8 or 9, maybe. Yeah, maybe less
Yeah.
than that even. But yes, that sort of entertainment. But again, it was quite formalized. Everybody would come in their pretty dresses, and then we'd all sit on the floor and watch the entertainment. The conjurer, who was always a man called Mr. Castro, and or the Punch and Judy show, or which was, I mean, the Punch and Judy show is a kind of traditional set of characters, and they're really quite grotesque. I think they're hardly probably not allowed now. Mr. Punch would beat up his wife and
Yeah,
whack
yeah. We all would think
the
it was very
baby.
funny.
Yes, absolutely, and
Yeah.
yeah, and do bad things to the policeman, and it was a bizarre story, but of domestic abuse basically. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's highly
True.
very.
True. But very much we had that. We had the same kind of thing here. But it wasn't so much in our birthday parties. I think we basically did games and danced around and ate cake and yeah, felt special for a day
Yeah,
also.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then moving on to sort of teenage years, how did your social life as a teenager develop?
Yeah, so I was shy. I had braces, I had glasses. I was very, very thin. And in the beginning it wasn't so easy when I came to like the secondary school or whatever you call it. And then at 16, I got lenses and my teeth were done. And then all of a sudden, I could be with like the popular people, which in my case was a more alternative group, which I really loved. I really loved. And I wasn't a sporty type, so I did not have friends from there. I basically had friends from school, and that was it. And we hung out endlessly. At 16, I was also given a Red pour Maxi, which was, a moped.
Oh
So I
gosh,
could
really? Wow,
my range of action really expanded.
that's fantastic. I certainly
Yeah.
didn't ever have one of those. Yeah,
And
yeah.
then, of course, because we had a swimming pool in summer, basically everybody would come to our house.
Yes, that must have been a wonderful sort of draw for social life.
Yeah. Yeah, you never know whether they come for you or for the swimming pool. But I think my mother also really enjoyed it. And yeah, no, it was very nice.
Yeah. So when I was a teenager, I'd gone to boarding school, so I had a sort of different set of friends in a way who weren't necessarily all in London, and there were dances we call and there were a lot of charity-based dances that mothers were on the committee of certain charities, and one of their fundraising things was to give teenage dances. and they would be in some hall somewhere, and there would be a band and a disco, and that was the sort of that was the sort of start of teenage socializing, and then obviously it got sort of looser and more, and then I have friends round, and it would be the social life became more like sort of going to films together and going out and doing things. I didn't, because I was in London, I guess I didn't need a moped. I was public
No, no,
transport.
no, that was not a thing. I was in a semi-rural area.
Yeah.
Also, remember at some point, I never really wanted to drink alcohol when I was young. And then at some point, I discovered that when a boy likes you, he offers you a drink. And when you say no, then that's the end of the conversation, basically. So that's when I thought, okay, let me just then have a beer or a glass of sherry or whatever it was we drank at the time. Like I must kind of, yeah, adopt those conventions because otherwise it all becomes so awkward. And of course, there were these first dances and first kisses, and
Yeah.
yeah, that was. I landed a boyfriend. I looked at him adoringly the whole time because I thought that was what you do with a boyfriend. And
Did you
yeah,
not adore him? Did you just look at him because you thought you ought to, or did you
I
actually?
thought I ought to. I thought that was the thing to do. I thought that was what men liked. Yeah, so I must have somehow, kind of copied that from my mother, although my mother was vivacious and yeah, they continued to have, people over and yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
spent my teenage social life. I also had a different social life in the holidays because we would go to our house in Aldborough,
Oh
which was,
yeah.
and I started sailing sort of dinghies, and the Yacht Club became the center of social life. And I would go sailing, sort of racing, in these little dinghies called lapwings in the summer holidays twice a week, and then
Yeah. Did
with
you
all,
enjoy sailing?
well, not really.
Not really.
Mind it, it was all right, but I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't. I really, it was mainly for the social life as far as I was concerned. Any kind of sport was not particularly my thing, and if I did do it, it would always have been for the social life that surrounded it rather than
Yeah.
the sport itself. But it was okay. It was quite fun, mostly if it was nice weather, it wasn't too taxing. So
No,
yeah.
I have a question. Did you learn to cook when you were young? Did anybody teach you how to cook?
Not really. I could cook very basic things. I think I did get taught to cook that. I mean, things like scrambled eggs and boiled eggs and probably a toast. Not, but no,
I'm not sure we can call that cooking.
no, but we did have cooking lessons at school. It was called domestic science.
You
And
did?
yes, at my boarding school, there was a domestic science room with three cookers in it, and I learnt to cook.
Was that only girls
It
learn
was only
domestic
yes,
science?
yes, yes. I don't think my brothers ever learned to cook anywhere at school anyway, and possibly not at home. Although they're perfectly good cooks now, but no, I didn't really know. I had to learn. In fact, Rob, my first husband, was a much better cook than I was, and he knew how to cook when we got married, or before we got married, obviously. And we used to give dinner parties, but not in the formal kind of way my parents did. But it was a thing when I was in my 20s, I guess. As couples, you gave dinner parties, you went to dinner parties, you cooked
Yeah.
for your friends. I was never especially good at it. I'm not sure what my friends had to sit through eating from my my cooking efforts.
Maybe it wasn't about the food so much as it was about the atmosphere and the conversation. I always hope that because I never learned to cook and I
No,
don't really have an interest. I can't remember how things, it's just not my thing.
no, but did you do dinner parties, say in your 20s, 30s? Was
Well, 20s, I was in my student days. I had people over, but of course I was vegetarian, which was quite rare then. But I was famous for one thing. I could make a cheese souffle.
Oh, very clever. Wow.
People talk about it still. People from those days, when they come for dinner now here, they go like, "Oh, we're having cheese souffle." I don't know how to make it anymore, but that was my kind of pièce de résistance back then. But in my small student room, I think it was mostly one-on-one. And then, we started also to go out for dinner,
Yeah.
in
Well, I
more
went to
restaurants.
Australia when I was 21. And so I was then, and I'm pretty sure I'd never experienced one in England before. We were introduced to barbecues. The weather was hot. You would have people round and you would cook outdoors, obviously, on a barbecue. And it was very meat orientated. I did eat meat in those days, but that was a whole new thing. And I think, by the time we came back to England 8 years later, barbecues had become a thing in England as well, and people were very into barbecuing. And also
I
another,
always thought the meat got burnt.
it often
Everything got burnt. I think it is a recipe for, now the cancer things with all these things getting burnt. But I think they've really progressed. My youngest brother has for a few years sold very designery barbecues in the US. Yeah,
ah, yes,
yeah.
yes, and
Big slabs of meat on them.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think they were, yes, I mean they were very big in sort of meat eating countries, I suppose, like America, South Africa, where they're
Yeah, the braai. Yeah,
yes, exactly. That's a sort of
yeah,
based word, isn't it? And
yeah.
obviously Australia. But the other thing that happened, I think, when I was in my 30s, is that cookbooks became a thing. Specialists, famous chefs, restaurants would produce cookbooks, and we became kind of more. It was more important to learn to cook, and that's where I sort of, I think, learned to cook in a way from those more interesting, Italian food. And then there were the,
Jamie Oliver.
yes, exactly, Jamie Oliver, Prue Leith, all the people who are still around. But they sort of started educating us in certainly in the UK in more interesting cooking and
Yeah,
Italian food and cooking Chinese food and
yeah.
I've still got a collection of ancient cookbooks on from dating back
And
from those
do
days.
you read them for pleasure? No,
No,
they just stand there.
no, I did sort of at one stage kind of read them for pleasure in a way, just to sort of learn about, I don't know, the food and cooking and recipes and things, but I certainly don't anymore. I don't,
Yeah.
I don't entertain at all anymore, at least not at home.
Really?
No, absolutely never.
Absolutely never. Is this a rule, a habit, something you've just,
It's just something I've stopped doing because I think, I mean, I did do until, I don't know, when did I stop? Maybe 10 or so years ago. It wasn't a sort of, like I'm going to stop entertaining, that's it. It wasn't like that.
I'm now 60, I'm not going to do this anymore kind of thing.
No, it wasn't like that at all. It was just, I think, a realization that I found it more stressful than pleasurable. And I just really, I don't like cooking for lots of people. I don't like cooking at all, particularly. But I just didn't want to have that sort of stress, really. So, if I see people now, we go out to dinner, we, meet somewhere else. I just don't, unless somebody, happens to be in the house and it's a meal time and I feel I really have to cook for them. But it just, yeah, my life doesn't run like that anymore. So it's very different for me to how it used to be. Whether I felt there used to be a sort of expectation and a necessity to, again, sort of give parties or barbecues or sort of share that kind of social
Yeah.
experience.
Coda.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? You
Well, I'm the kind of person I can invite people over for dinner, and then because I've completely forgotten that I can't cook. But and also we live in a new space, so friends have come over. I really like, small dinners with just, two, three people. That you can have a real conversation. But then on the other hand, we have a table that kind of sits eight, which is also like on New Year's we had six people over. Two of them we never knew we hadn't met before, and I really enjoy that. But then, of course, I asked everybody to bring a dish, so that was also easy. And yeah, so I do feel I have an active social life, but it is not, yeah, not so much people here. I see people, at kind of still professional things. And like next week, I will have people over, and we are all reading a book that is written by a friend of mine, Jude Kervin, and it's a very difficult book. It's called Gaia, Her Story. It's about the whole cosmology. Fortunately, she has consented to being online for 45 minutes, so we can kind of talk to her and I can hear it instead. But I enjoy that. And then I go like, oh my God, what am I making? And I resort to kind of easy things, but also because we have, a topic of conversation. And mostly Jos cooks. Jos is a really good cook. He understands cooking. He understands how ingredients work together and how you get the flavor. And yeah, always want more dishes. He's like, okay, two, three dishes. I was like, no, let's have a bit more. Let's have an in between. I usually do the dessert, and I'm better at, buying than at cooking.
Yeah.
I'm very clever buyer for, and of course there is lots of that in a city.
Yeah.
But I enjoy also having people in the house. I really love it.
Yes, I feel I probably don't so much anymore now. I used to belong to a book club like you, and that was really nice. I mean, we would go move it around different people's houses every month. We would read a book, but we wouldn't. Nobody would have to cook. It would be we'd order in a takeaway.
Oh yeah.
So that was sort of nice, and that was a treat. And then that was when I was in London, so that kind of stopped. I was yeah, I did. There was a book club briefly here, but and that was a thing as well, probably in the I don't know, was it the 1990s perhaps? Book clubs
Oh,
became
this is my first book club ever. So,
oh, right, right.
and it's just started in what is it, February? So, by
Oh,
a friend of
they're
mine.
great. I think that I
Yeah,
mean I had a book club, an online book club in my A Book of One's Own Abu Facebook group, and I would get some really kind of top authors to come and speak, and then be kind of questioned by people
yeah.
who came. But that was on a Zoom call, so that I find that so much of my social life, even though a lot of it's a work life, thing as well. I'm talking to so many people online, on Zoom, in Teams, on Google Meets. And I think maybe that's why I don't feel the need to sort of socialize or entertain at home anymore. I get plenty of people. I'm in touch with plenty of people. And I think social life is a different thing now. I mean, I really felt when I was perhaps a teenager or younger that it was important. It was a status thing. You had to have a good social life. You had to go out a lot. You had to have people round. You had to have a big group of friends and do lots of stuff. And I think probably also because of COVID, that's changed in a way. The concept of social life is different now, perhaps especially for young people.
I think for young people, there's still a lot of status, but maybe that is online. But
Yeah,
I mean, now, but I do think there's a real difference between talking on Zoom or taking trouble to go to someone's house, cooking for people or meeting people for a walk or yeah. I do more of that than I used to. I never used to really make time for that, but I do make time for that now that I am 70.
yes, yes. Well, I mean, I've got a lot of family, and my kind of in-person social life is mostly to do to do with family. So, I mean, I regularly go to the theatre with my two sons, and we will have dinner before or afterwards, and
Yeah,
that will be lovely.
lovely.
And yes, and we sort of get together as a family every so often, and so yes, and then I have work events where there are lots of people, and it's sort of sometimes it's kind of like entertaining. I mean, I've got my book launch tonight, and that feels like the stress of entertaining people are coming. And although I'm not cooking, obviously,
No.
be a little kind of bit of
But will
catering.
you give a talk? How will it?
Yes, yes, I will, and so will some other people. A couple of our authors and my colleague Daniel Priestley will be talking. So yes, it will be a little event. But again, I'm completely unreasonably stressed out by it. I know it'll be fine.
Oh.
It will all just go, it will all fall into place. And I don't know why I feel this sort of anxiety about it this morning. Uh,
Yeah, well, it is a thing, and you're again presenting something, and yes, there's always like, what if nobody turns up? But how could you come into a situation where you're more relaxed so you can enjoy it more and not only after the fact?
No, I will enjoy it as soon as it gets going. I will enjoy
Okay.
it. It's just up to the minute that nobody is there, and then maybe one person's there, and you think, oh goodness, nobody else is going to turn up.
Oh.
I don't know why. I can't lose that sort of anxiety about.
Well, I'm very much, when I learned the principles of open space technology, which is a way to open up a conference for what participants want to talk about. And one of them is whoever comes are the right people. And I think that is such, when I was organizing an event every other week for the Center for Human Emergence, 10 years ago, it's like whoever comes are the right people. Let me just stick to that. What if I truly believe that even if it is a small group, the conversation we will have will be enriching and people will say, I'm so happy it was a small group because I really got to talk to this and that person. So it's a great rule.
It's true. It's true, and I do kind of believe that in many ways. Especially, I mean, I run a mastermind for 12 women, and I really believe we have a group call every month, and I really believe that the people who show up on each call are absolutely the right people to be there for that particular
Yeah.
conversation. And sometimes everybody's there, and sometimes one or two
Yeah.
people.
So if you could extend that firm belief into, looking forward to your launch, I
Yes.
think it is great. You're 70, you're launching another book. It's just superb.
Yes, it's something about the in-personness of it and will it feel like an empty room with a few people milling about? And I don't know. I don't know why. I
Yeah.
don't, I think, I'm on lots of sort of big Zoom calls or group Zoom calls, and I doesn't matter at all whether sometimes I'll have a kind of mentoring call where several people are supposed to turn up and literally there's just one person there that can happen. And it's fine. It's lovely. It's lovely for them and it's lovely for me. And we have a good kind of really good intensive conversation. And that doesn't worry me at all. Or even if nobody turns off up, because then I just turn the Zoom off and go and do something else, which is fine. But somehow, I don't know, in-person stuff still worries me slightly more. I haven't got to the bottom of why that should be.
Yeah. I think also the less you do of it, the more kind of trepidation you have when it happens,
Yeah,
right?
maybe that's true. Maybe
So
I,
you kind of get out of that habit
yeah,
and then it is all a bit, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh, I really love in-person things.
Yes, no, I do too. I do. I do love getting together with people. I'm not a complete hermit at all, but
No, you're not. You're not.
and it is.
Yeah, but about the socializing, sometimes I kind of yours is very much, working in the week and then resting in the weekend. And when he's a painter, an artist, and when he has kind of this creative period, which has now been going on, he's kind of making a new series of paintings, and I think he's been at it like 4, 6 months. He's also in a particular kind of concentration that he wants to preserve, and he can do things, but he also really limits it. And so I would say, let's have those people over for dinner, knowing that he will take it upon himself to really, think of the meal, think of the shopping beforehand. He does all the wine. I don't drink alcohol, so he does all that wine things and everything. And I'm just, the frilly one on the outside. But what is also different from my parents' life is that my mother would do things during the day, but in the evenings, she would not make appointments with friends. unless my father was going out. So my father belonged to the Rotary, and I think he went like every Monday or every Tuesday. So that was my mother's night to go to the movie with a friend. And that is very different because I don't. I mean, we kind of compare notes so that we see each other, but Jos is mainly at home and I do my thing. Like I was a week up in Scotland,
Yeah.
and I kind of don't feel guilty. I don't feel, that I oughtn't to do that. Whereas, my mother would not do that. But maybe your mother was different in that respect.
Yes, no, I think no, I think certainly in the evenings they would do things. I mean, they would be together in the house, or they would go out or have, social events as a couple. Very much. I don't remember my mother going out literally at all without my father. Or
Yeah.
I mean, he would occasionally go out in the evenings for sort of I don't know, club dinners or city dinners or
Men's club
yes, yes,
dinners.
exactly. But I don't remember her doing that very often, or even at all. I don't even remember her going to the cinema at all, or having. But maybe, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just my memory. But I don't
No,
think.
I think that has really changed, right? That kind of self-sufficiency of men
Yeah.
also. And our kind of we have a life of our own and we make our own plans and then we kind of compare notes and
Yes, and the distinctions are blurred as well between, well, our fathers used to work, and that was there was certain sort of I mean, that probably was a social life to some degree for them. I mean, my
yeah,
father used to have lunch at his club every day, and so he wasn't a terribly sociable man anyway. But I guess he would sit and talk to people. And then, and my mother would be at home or doing, her stuff. And then the social life was quite their joint social life was had quite specific sort of boundaries and rules and things that you did, like give dinner parties or go out to other people's dinner parties or
yeah,
go to parties. And I think ours is much more fluid than that. I mean, for instance, you just said you've just been on a retreat for a week. That's social life, isn't it? I mean, you've just had a
yeah,
very sociable time with your
yeah.
18 eldest daughters. And
My
that's
eldest
thing,
daughters and a few days afterwards with friends and yeah,
yeah, and that's sort of, I think, the idea of a social life has changed and is not what it was. It used to be like how many friends you had, how often you would go out, what you would do together, and it was kind of it was much more it was much clearer about what that was supposed to be. And I much prefer this sort of idea that it's it is whatever suits you, whatever suits us.
yeah. And it also is different when you have like a circle that is quite closed with a few variations
Yeah,
and people see each other all the time, which is, yeah, what my parents kind of had. What I don't have, I have circles here and there, and then in my big, birthday bashes, I bring them together, and people, oh, yeah, maybe I remember you from 5 years ago, but maybe
yeah,
not. So that is also different.
yes, yes, indeed. I
Yeah,
think of the people who've been to my 40th, 50th, 60th, 70th birthday parties, which I have done for all of those birthdays. The people who've come there's not that much crossover. There's, sort of family and a few very good friends, but otherwise it's changed very much. The attendees
yeah,
who
mine too. Mine
are,
too. As my life progressed, I found new people, new friends, and new circles, and kept from every circle, I kept someone. But
yeah,
also, mothers have had, I mean, they were both widowed. And so they've had to find out for themselves,
yeah.
how do you do it when that husband suddenly is not there?
Yes, yes. And in my mother's case, she had to make a lot of allowances because my father was blind for the last 12 years of his
Yeah.
life. So that was a constriction, if you like, on what they could and couldn't do. And so that, I guess, that really did affect her social life. and how. But I mean, she still provided a social life for him. That was still very much her role. So yes, I guess she was much freer after that. But again, would have needed to find different people, and she absolutely did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my mother, I mean, of course, when she was widowed, she was 80, and some of her friends also were already widowed, and they stuck together, right? And yeah, made sure they had things to do and places to go. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I mean, my mother did a lot of. She was younger when she was widowed in her late 60s, and she did a lot of.
Wow. So at our age, she was already a widow.
Yeah, because my father was 20 years older than her. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So she did a lot of traveling through her late 60s, 70s, early 80s. Lots of cruises, lots of holidays, lots of trips to interesting places. So yes, and she met a lot of people on those as well. And I guess
Hmm.
actually travel is somewhere that people also meet people and develop new social bonds too, which didn't happen very much when we were young.
Yeah, I don't know. My parents used to invite friends to go along. My father would think up a trip and then invite friends. And as they got older, the destinations got like more difficult. And some of his friends said, "No, I'm not going on, kind of walk in the Himalayas and see where the Dalai Lama was born at 2,000 meters elevation. I
Yes.
can't do that anymore with my heart." So yeah, they did meet new friends there, but yeah, I find it a privilege that I can still make new friends. I did not think that I would do that at 70, but that is so wonderful.
No, no, it's lovely, isn't it? And I enjoy what, I suppose I call my social life now. I feel very comfortable with it. It's, not at all like it was when I was younger. I don't feel I have to do anything particular, entertain in any particular
No,
ways, but I
we
feel
don't need to impress anymore,
no,
although
no,
you will impress this afternoon at the launch of your book.
I
I'm
hope
sure.
so.
I am already impressed, Lucy, with your
I'll tell you
your
how it,
oeuvre, your body of work.
I'll tell you next week if anybody turned up
Yes,
or not.
let's talk
If
about this next
it
week.
was a disaster or fun. Yes, yes, I will fill you in.
Enjoy. Mostly, I wish upon you to enjoy. And once it gets going, you'll enjoy. I know that.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I'm sure I will. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Have a wonderful launch.
Thank you so much, and we'll talk next week.
We'll talk next week. Bye.
Bye.